All right, hello everybody. We are in Masechet Eruvin, Daf Kaf He. We're going to be dealing with a number of interesting cases, actually quite a lot of cases, but each discussion is relatively short. What they all have in common is discussing a karpef. So to review, a karpef is an enclosed space that's for non-residential use. So a regular chatzer is residential use. That means for humans or animals that rest there, walk around there. If it's a regular chatzer, then as long as it's enclosed with proper walls, it can be as big as you want. A karpef, however, which is either a storage area, people don't go there, or a vegetable garden that people don't walk there, then if it's enclosed and up to 2 bet se'ah, up to 5,000 square amot, then you can carry there, but not if it's bigger than 2 bet se'ah. So that's the limitation of karpef. Now, once something is enclosed with having in mind that it would be a karpef, and then you want to change your mind, and you say, you know what, I'm going to bring furniture out there, I'm going to start using it. Well, the existing walls cannot be used. You have to do something in order to redefine space. So we're going to be dealing with two different scenarios. One is if a karpef is too big, what are some ways I can do, what are some things I can do to reduce the space, reduce the area? And so then it's still a karpef, but it's smaller than 2 bet se'ah. Or another strategy is to somehow create new walls. Obviously, you can knock down a big section of wall 10 amot and rebuild it, but that's hard to do. Any other ways of building something in order to redefine the space as now residential use. So those are the two basic things, and three in each category. Then we'll have 2 more cases of a wall that fell, and what happens then between a courtyard and karpef, between the house and the karpef. Okay, so we go right in with trying to reduce the size of a karpef with trees or a post. And we say as follows: karpef yoten mi bet sa'atayim shelo hukaf ladira. You have this enclosed area that's more than 2 se'ah, so it's too big, can't carry there because you did not have in mind to enclose it as a dira. So the current walls do not serve a good purpose. And then now you want to make it smaller. And so one of the strategies would be to plant trees. That's not good enough. Planting trees not good enough because trees are a regular thing that you have in a karpef. And so they don't reduce the square footage of the empty space. However, anabo amud gaboa to create something else, which is like a kind of a useless item that would normally be there. If you create a little platform, here's a nice picture, right? A kind of space that's 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim square on top, right? This creates its own reshut. If this was in a reshut hayachid, and outside of Reshut Rabim, that would create a little Reshut Yachid. So since this creates its own little area, it reduces the size of this. So in this case, it's quite small. Let's say this was exactly, Bet Satayim and a little bit more. So then that would be, then even just adding this little post somewhere would bring it in, or it could be bigger, obviously. Okay, so this was one strategy. You create a little platform, and that creates a separate space. So everybody agrees if it's 4 tefachim or bigger in its top surface area, that works. However, pachot mishelosh, if the top is less than 3 tefachim, then everyone would agree that that's certainly not good because we'll see why. If it's between 3 and 4 tefachim on top of that little pole, that is subject to machloket. Rabban says it's good. It does become its own area and reduces the overall space, and then you can carry in the whole thing. And Rabban says no. Why? So since if it's less than 3 tefachim, we apply lavud, and anything less than 3 tefachim, it's like it's not there at all. So everyone would agree that's just like a little pole. That's not going to do anything. But Rabban says, since anything more than 3, since it's not lavud, it's something important in and of itself. So that's good enough. Rabban, however, says so it's not quite enough to make its own reshut because that generally you need 4 tefachim, and therefore anything less than 4 is not important. Okay, so that's the first strategy. Now we're going to try a second, so that works. And now we're going to try a second strategy, which is to create a second wall. So what I want to do in this case is, this is too big, too much area, more than 2 se'ah, and so I build a wall here on the side, and that encloses it. And theoretically, it could also act as a new wall, potentially, but I think the simple understanding is that it's making the area smaller. Okay, so if it's 4 tefachim away from this wall, well, that's good. That's a significant amount. If it's less than 3 tefachim away from this wall, it's lavud. It's like you're just adding more to that current wall. It's not a new wall. You're not doing anything. So that is not good enough. But the question is, if it's between 3 and 4, then what would be the law? Same as the machloket before, just a different application. Why? Rava says once it's more than 3, it's not lavud anymore. So now it's its own entity. It's not combined with the old wall. So that's good. He says, no, you don't say that. Since the space that it's making it away from it is has to be 4 or more, because 4 makes its own space, its own area. Less than 4, although it's not lavud, it's not its own area, it's not significant. So we have the same machloket. Okay, so that was 2 cases. Now we have this line, which is 2 interpretations. That's it, right? So Rashi puts a period here and explains that this is its own statement. Says he understands those previous 2 examples as not being about between 3 and 4, but rather being less than 3. Now, even Rava, who's Mekel, would Mekel even less than 3. Okay, possibly. However, rather they're arguing on this case, which I think makes sense. Okay, Tachbo. תחבותית ויכול לעמוד בפני עצמו הווה מיעוט. אינו יכול לעמוד בפני עצמו, רבה אמר הווה מיעוט, רבה אמר לה הווה מיעוט. Okay, instead of building a new wall, what you do is, there's no picture for this, but now picture this wall, and you just add more concrete on top of on top of this wall, right to the side of it. You make it thicker, and by making it thicker, you reduce the area, you reduce that space. So if that plaster can stand on its own, if you would take away the original wall, can that plaster stand on its own? Then that's good. Everyone would agree. However, if it cannot stand on its own, Rava says it's still okay because it's there after all. Rava says no, it's not okay because it's not doing anything. Can't stand on its own, so therefore it's not a wall. So we don't consider it. Okay, all this would be really like a good example of likula because all this is within 3 tefachim of the old wall. And still, here there's a machloket whether we can consider that area to be good or not. So I think this actually is a good explanation of what the kula case would be. Okay, now we're going to explain why. Right, it's standing. That extra plaster that I added can't stand on its own, so therefore cannot serve as a wall on its own. All right, good. Now we get to the next case, which is somehow building a new wall. What can I do to build a new wall? So hirchik minatel arba'a ve'asa mechisa ho'il achot mishelosha. Okay, if I a distance 4 handbreadths from a tail. So I have a tail. It's like this picture here. A tail is a mound of dirt. So this mound of dirt served as the 4th wall. I had 3 walls, and this mound served as another wall. Because the mound is not exactly the same as a wall, it's kind of serving as a wall. If I do go and build another wall 4 tefachim away, that would be fine, right? Even if it was a wall here. So 4 tefachim away, that would both reduce the space and also could serve as a new wall. So in that case, everyone would agree is fine. However, the question is if it's if it's less than that, it would be a problem, subject to same machloket as before. Okay, so if it's 4 amot away, 4 tefachim away, that's fine. Pachot mishelosha, or al sefat hatel, if it's less than 3, or if I put the fence on top of the mound, right, like this, right? So it's either close or actually on top of it. In both of those cases, Rav Chisda and Rav Hamnuna. Now, two different Amoraim argue on this. Chad amar ho'il, chad amar lo ho'il. One says, yes, that is effective, and it can be considered a new wall. And so now, even though I made the original walls, having in mind that it's going to be non-residential, and this area is too big, but now I made a new wall. And so I'm redefining it when I make the new wall as residential space. I'm going to use it for residential space, and I really use it for that, right? So this is considered good. A new wall, a wall on top of a mound, is considered a new wall, according to one opinion. One says yes, one says no. We don't know which one says which, so now we're going to try to figure that out. It must be Rav Chisda is the one that's lenient and says a wall on top of the mound is good. Because he said in a different case, if I make a mechisa on top of a mechisa, in other words, I add another mechisa right next to a previous one, then it works for Shabbat. The second one is considered a partition for Shabbat, for the laws of Shabbat, which is this case. And so therefore, it would make perfect sense. The mound is a wall, but now making another wall on top of it, right? So that's a good application. So Rav Chisda would be the one to be lenient. However, even Rav Chisda agrees that it's not good for a different case, nichsei hager. Let's explain that case. Someone who converts, their biological family is no longer related to them halachically, right? Because according to halacha, he's like a newborn baby, right? So even though he still has biological family, but halachically they're not considered his heirs. And so if a ger dies, he doesn't write a will or anything, then that property does not go to his closest family. I mean, if he has kids, it will go to his kids. If he had them after he converted. Let's say he has no kids. So then this is up for grabs, right? It's ownerless. So now if someone wants to go and acquire it, you have to do an act of acquiring it, which can mean different things. It can mean building a fence around it or improving, doing something to the land, and that whoever does that first actually acquires it. So in this case, if I made a new wall around the property of a convert who died, then that would be mine. However, if there is already a wall there and I add another wall on top of it, that's not good enough, right? That is not form a kinyan. So according to Rav Chisda, it is a wall on top of a wall is good for Shabbat, but not good for acquiring the property of a convert. But Rav Sheshet amad, af b'Shabbat nami lo ho'il tistayem. Rav Sheshet is machmir on both cases, so they all agree that you can't make a wall on top of a wall for a convert. Rav Sheshet is machmir also on Shabbat. And so now we know who says which one. In the case of building a wall on top of a mound, it's Rav Chisda that says that forms a new wall, and Rav Sheshet says it does not form a new wall. Okay, good. Amar Rav Chisda, umodeli Rav Sheshet shemasa mechisa al hatel sheho'il. So Rav Chisda now adds, Rav Sheshet would agree with me when I erect the partition on top of the mound rather than just next to it. So everything that we just said is talking about a case where I make it less than 3 tefachim, right, next to if it's 4 tefachim, everybody agrees okay. If it's 3 tefachim or less, that was the subject of machloket. But actually making it on top, according to this, everyone would agree is okay. Let's analyze that. My tama oil ba'avir mechisot elyona hudad. Why is this? Because of the space that's on top of the partition. So this picture makes it clear. This area on top of the partition, let's say there's a house there, so let's say someone lives there or uses it, whatever. So this did not have a wall around it originally. And so when I come and I build a wall around it, I am making an effective wall for whoever is inside and who is on top of the mound. Since it is a new wall for that purpose, Therefore, it is halachically a new wall and can serve as a new wall also for that outside. So even though from the perspective of someone on the land, there is already a wall here, and now you're just building a wall on top of a wall, right? Which according to Rav Sheshet is not significant. And so if it was just on the floor, it would not be good. However, in this case, because from the perspective, it's like theory of relativity, right? For Eruvin, from the perspective of someone up here, it is a new wall, and once it is a new wall for one purpose, it can be used as a new wall for another purpose. All right, good. So that concludes that case. And now we get to the next one, which is a wall that's created passively. When I make a secondary wall, and the first wall then sinks into the ground. And so even though when I built the second wall, it was not significant because the first wall was there, but then the first wall somehow disappears on its own. So what will be that case? If the old walls get swallowed up and the walls I built on top and now are standing, right? So it's it wasn't good when I built it, but now passively it becomes a good wall. What is the case? What is the law in that case? So Lemai, regarding which halacha are you asking for? Is it for to acquire the property of a convert or for Shabbat? Let's analyze that first one. Even היינו ירמיה ביראה, דאמר ירמיה ביראה, אמר רב יהודה, הימן דשתה אפילה דארעה דגר, ותייסר לאחרינה, לפק בה פורתה, בתרה קנה, כמה לה קנה. So we can answer that and say it would not be good, this case, this passive case, would not be good to acquire property. And by analogy to another similar case, if someone comes, convert dies, his land is up for grabs. So someone comes and takes a turnip and puts it in there, right? He sticks it in the land. And then a second person comes and takes a shovel and digs a little, right? Plows a little bit. The second person that acquires it. Why? Because they although just digging a little doesn't add much to it, but it adds something. Whereas putting the turnip there doesn't add anything right away. Just sticking a turnip in the ground does nothing right now. Over time, all right, hopefully it will take that I'm doing directly now. That's only something that's passively happening on its own much later. Whereas the person that actually dug, that he improved the land immediately. And so therefore, it's the second person that gets it and not the first person. So the analogy to here is that when I added a second wall around this land, it didn't improve. And even though the first wall then sank, doesn't matter, right? Because this was only a passive improvement that happened later after my action. So in order to acquire land, the action has to happen immediately when the improvement has to happen immediately with my action. So therefore, the question is not as simple answer of no in that case. Rather, it must be talking about a case of Shabbat. So on Shabbat, if I make a second wall and then the first wall sinks, so it's passively created. Is that good? The answer is going to be yes. And we know this from this baraita, which one we've seen already. Even if a wall is passively created, even on Shabbat, right? For sure, before Shabbat, is still considered a good mechisa, right? Whether it was done by mistake or on purpose. On purpose would be someone comes and violates Shabbat and actually builds a wall. It still, even though he violated Shabbat, it still can be used as a wall, or somehow by mistake, right? Something just happened, something fell off a truck, and now it's there's a wall there. It can be used as a wall, so even though it was not intended and put there on purpose. Okay, so therefore it is. Now we did have a challenge, but we're going to answer the challenge. Rav Nachman said, when you call that mechitza that's created on Shabbat, and you say it's good mechitza, that was only lehachmir. That was only to say that if I enclose an area on Shabbat with a mechitza, then becomes a shut hayachid lehachmir, which means I can't throw. Someone who throws from the shut harabim into that area is going to be chayav right? Because we do consider this a wall. But at that, we didn't mean it lehakel, doesn't mean that now you can actually use and walk in that area. So according to that, we really would not be able to use this. This would not be a good proof, because a secondary wall that's added to a primary wall, and then the first wall fell, that's something created on its own, but the secondary wall maybe could be lechumra, but it doesn't mean that you could use it to carry. But that's okay. We respond to this. Rav Nachman only made this prohibition when you do it on purpose, because if I go build a mechisa on purpose, I shouldn't benefit from violating Shabbat. But if it happened on its own somehow, then it would be okay. And so too in this case, it would be okay. All right, we have a little story that's just similar to the case we had. There was a certain woman who she saw a convert died and she wanted to get the property, so she built a partition on top of the existing partition. After that, a man came and just plowed a little bit, dug a little bit in the ground. Nachman was the judge, and they both came before him, and he gave it to the man, even though he did relatively little, and she worked a lot, making a whole new wall. So she came and she was crying before him. She's not fair. Says, what can I do? You did not do an act of possession the way that men do. I don't know if it means really men, but the way that people do. In other words, you worked a lot, but this is technically not a new wall, and so therefore you did not do a halachically significant act of acquisition, whereas the man did. Okay, so that's a story that shows that case. Okay, kalpef bat shalosh v'kira bo bet se'ah. So now we're dealing with the next case. Of adding a roof. So that's the third case of somehow trying to create a new wall or reduce the size. We'll see how this works. It actually works as a new wall. And the way we're going to do this is by taking this area, let's say this area is 3 bet se'ah, and we cover 1 se'ah of it. Right, so now this area is covered, and so the question is that become a separate area, and then what I have left is only 2 se'ah. So I originally made these walls to be non-residential use, but now when I put this in, right, does that reduce the area? Well, we're going to see that it doesn't actually reduce the area, but perhaps this lip can act as an imaginary wall. We imagine it as if it's going down, and this can create its own wall. So that's the case. So if we have a kalpef that is 3 se'ah, and then I made a roof over 1 se'ah. Rava amar avir keruyo meyatero. Rabbi Zera amar en avir keruyo meyatero. So Rava says that the space is a continuation of the 2 bet se'ah. In other words, it's all considered 1, still considered 3 bet se'ah, right? So the space adds on to the roof part, and it's all 1 area. In other words, you didn't help anything. The Bezerah says, no, the space is separate from the roofed area, and therefore it's okay. There are some versions that says matira, in which case the opinions would be the opposite, but this looks like the original. Okay, so we have Rava here is the one that's machmir. Rabbi Zera is mekel. Lema Rava v'Rabbi Zera bepluta de Rav Shmuel kami palge. So what's the reason for their machloket? Perhaps they are arguing on the same issue as prior Amoraim, Rav and Shmuel. Ditmar ach sadra babik'ah. Rav amar mutar letaltel bechula. Shmuel amar en metaltelin ela barba amot. If I have a veranda in the middle of the Reshut Harabim, I have something like this, right? And so the question is, can I carry inside here? And that's the question of Rav and Shemuel, because the one that says permitted says pi tikra yored. That's the key term. We consider the edge of the roof as if it goes down and forms an enclosure. Like something to the eye, it looks like it's actually enclosed. And so this would seem to be a similar case. Ditmar עכשיו בגדיו אמר מותר לטלטל בחולה, שמואל אמר אין מטלטלין אלא בארבע אמות. When you say you can only carry 4 amot, it means you really can't carry. You can carry anywhere 4 amot, even in Shut Rabim. So Rav Amar mutar l'tateh b'chola amrinan pitikra yored v'sotem. Shmuel Amar en metaltlin ela b'arba amot lo amrinan pitikra yored v'sotem. Right? Rav says you do imagine the roof as if it's coming down, and Shmuel says you don't. And so that would be the same as seem to be the same as our case where I cover a third of it. Right? Do I consider that to be like the roof to be like a new wall? Or not, and so this would be a parallel machloket. So the Gemara says no, it doesn't necessarily match up. With Rav and Shmuel, if the roof was made like a veranda roof or something like this, in other words, a straight roof, then you're right, it would match up and fine. But in this case, but we are dealing here, we could be dealing here with something that's made like a hammock. In other words, a sloped roof, like a shed. And that's the machloket that they're talking about, even in a sloped roof. Right, so in other words, even in a sloped roof, if it was a straight roof, everyone would agree that's okay. But the question is if it's a sloped roof, like this, yeah, that is the machloket, whether we would say that the pitikra, that the roof comes down, even in this case, or not when it's sloped. Okay, it's interesting that being straight, a straight roof is better for this than sloped. And we might think that sloped is closer to being perpendicular, closer to being a wall, but maybe it's the very contrast that was what you need. All right, good. So we have that machloket, and now the Bizera adds, Umodina bekarpef shenifras bimlo'o lehaser she'asur. The Bizera says, I agree, even though I said before that I'm mekel, I would agree in a different case with a karpef that opens up into a courtyard. It once was a wall, and now the wall fell down. In other words, case like this. So here I have a karpef, this is non-residential use, and let's say this was exactly bet sa'atayim within a wall. There used to be a wall here. And so this is a chatzer. So the chatzer certainly I can carry, and the chatzer can be any size, doesn't matter. But this has to be up to 2 se'ah, which it was. But now the wall breaks, and so now it's this area is open to this area. And so what he's saying is that I would agree that in the case like this, it is prohibited. Okay, so let's try to figure out why that is. Because the space of the courtyard makes it more than 2 se'ah, right? So it was just under 2 se'ah now it's bigger. Now let's try to figure this out exactly. I'll just summarize for you what we're going to say to make it clearer. First, we seem to think that it's this entire space that's making it bigger. Let's say this itself is a se'ah. So now I have 2 se'ah plus another se'ah, it's way too big. But we're going to reject that because this is permitted area. So a permitted area shouldn't make this area prohibited. So rather what we're going to end up concluding is that it's the area of the wall itself, right? The wall takes up space. If anybody ever built a house, right, you know this well. You think you have a lot of room, but I'm just going to add a wall here, or two. But the walls take up a lot of footage themselves. So once I open this up, this area is where the wall is part of the karpef. And so if it was just under 2 se'ah, now it's going to be more than 2 se'ah because of this area. So that's where we're going to conclude. So Amar Bizera, right? So okay, Matkifla Rav Yosef, V'chi Avir Hamutar Lo Osra. So right now we're thinking that it's the area of the courtyard that's being added and is making it prohibited. He says, why should that be? A courtyard, the chatzer, is permitted place. So why should the permitted area make the other area prohibited? It should be just make it better. Amar Abaye says, no. Keman, who are you asking? Like, could it be Shimon? Okay. A side point now, there's a machloket between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan that we did see previously regarding if you have different types of areas, like a roofed area or on top of a roof, karpef, chatzer, and they're all connected with each other. The rabbis, Rabbanan say, I cannot transfer from one to the other. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, any utensils that were already in one of those courtyards, I can transfer from one to the other. In other words, you can combine different types of open area courtyards. So, in this case, that would be this case where I'm combining a chatzer and a karpef. So according to the Banan, I understand it wouldn't be okay. But according to the Bishimon, it looks like it would be okay. However, even for the Bishimon Nameh, even the Bishimon in this case would be a problem because of that sliver of space that where the wall was. That is certainly part of the karpef. And that the karpef was just under 2 se'ah, now it's going to be 2 se'ah, and that's why it's prohibited. And we're going to prove this a little bit indirectly. The amad of chista, karpef shenifras bimlo'o lechaser, chaser muteret vekarpef asur. The chista says that if a karpef opens fully to a chaser, that's this case. So I have a karpef and it has one full wall open to a chaser, then the chatzer remains permitted and the karpef is not allowed. Now why? Chatzer my ta'amad itlegi pufeh v'hazimnim demashkacht la ipecha. If you think it's because the chatzer has these side walls, right, that protrude, and so therefore I have 1, 2, 3 walls, and I have this already the beginning of a wall, and so therefore, that's why the chaser is okay. And the karpef is a problem because from the perspective of someone standing here, he doesn't see these side protrusions. And so this is an entirely open wall. Is that the reason why he says so? That can't be the reason, because if you flip them then, and you say, right, let's say the karpef was bigger than the chaser. Well, in such a case, the karpef should be allowed because I have the beginnings of wall, and the chaser should be prohibited because there I have no wall. But he didn't make any distinction like that. He just said, anytime you have a karpef connected to a chaser, it's no good. So that can't be the reason. We need a more universal reason why it should be a problem. Ela mishum damrinan zeh avir mechisot mi'atero, zeh en avir mechisot mi'atero. Rather, it's because of that sliver of space between them. And so when you have the karpef, right, that and open, it's and it becomes a little bit more, that's a problem. Whereas for the chatzer, if the chatzer had a wall and a part of it broke, that's okay because a chatzer can be as big as you want. So that extra space of where that wall was would not be a problem. All right, good. So now that's the wall that fell down, and now we get to our last case of a wall that fell down, and this time it's between a house and a karpef. And we have this story, Hahu Bustena, an orchard, that was adjacent to a wall of a mansion. Okay, so we're assuming the orchard is bigger than 2 se'ah, but it's enclosed for the purpose of residence. I mean, we said that an orchard has trees in it, so trees are nice for walking under the trees, so that's considered still residential use. However, one of the walls, the outer wall, fell down. Let's look at the picture here. Okay, so here's the orchard, and so it's connected to a house, and so that would all be fine. The problem is the wall, the exterior wall of the house, falls down, and so now you have 1, 2, 3 walls, but you're missing a wall here. The question is, can you use the interior wall to, kind of extend and close this up? So the Bevai said, it should still be okay, because after all, there's an inner wall, the living room wall inside the house, and so why not just use that? Rav Papi gives a very sharp response to it. Mishum datu mimulae amritu mile mulayata. He says, because you come from truncated people, that's why you say a truncated matter. So Rav Bevai traces his lineage from the family of Eli, who was cursed that his descendants would be short-lived. And so he's now, Rav Pipi is using that. He says, just like you have shortened lives, your logic is also falling short. So he's saying this is, what you said does not make sense. He made it an ad hominem attack too. So That wall was created to be an interior wall. And so you cannot take an interior wall and now use it as an exterior wall. It was not meant for that. And so therefore, this is now open and breached, and it would be a problem. And so that concludes that case that fell down, and we'll continue tomorrow with a few more interesting cases regarding Karpef, and Be'ezrat Hashem will be able to conclude the second Perek tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen v'Amen.